What do y'all think? Greatest Raw of all time tonight? Greatest one in history, June 14th, 2021? Never in the history of Monday Night Raw has there been a Raw better than tonight. Is that the overall opinion of you guys? Let me know in the chat. Please grade the show tonight, 1 through 10, A, B, C, D, or F. And let me know what you think of tonight, because it was our typical Monday Night Raw with a whole bunch of predictable nonsense. Whole lot of good in-ring work tonight, which was good to see. But again, you know, we're treading water in the Thunderdome. We got another month before fans come back, about exactly a month and a couple of days now. And WWE is just going to be spoon-feeding us a bunch of shit. Raw had its bright spots tonight. I don't think it was, you know, the worst of, you know, maybe the last few weeks, but again, you know, a very, you know, skippable show with only a couple of interesting tidbits, like Alexa Bliss getting back in the ring. That was kind of interesting. New Day and RK Bro tore it down in the ring. That was very good. Some interesting developments regarding Jeff Hardy. Possible retirement on the horizon that they seem to be teasing here tonight. So there were a few things that I found, you know, worth discussing on the show. But for the most part, like I said, in the new Raw streams between now and when fans come back, I think we're going to keep our Raw reviews to a relative minimum, and then we're going to get into talking about more fun stuff that we can discuss and hang out and chat about here on the podcast instead of just trying to talk for 2 hours about this fucking nonsense. Now, as many of you know, I also was not here yesterday to do a Takeover review. I had a family gathering that I could not get out of, so I had to miss one, and I think I picked probably the best possible pay-per-view to miss. Even though it was very good, the in-ring work was off the charts last night. It was very predictable show. I went perfect in my predictions. I'm sure many of you did as well. And a lot of what we expected to see happened. So in regards to that, you know, there's not too much to discuss in terms of last night, but I will mention it, and we'll talk about TakeOver last night. And then we're going to proceed with our This Week in Raw History segment that I'm going to try to incorporate on every show going forward on Monday nights. Last week, we kicked things off with a retro Raw review, but I like the idea of doing a history segment more. That way we can talk about multiple years, multiple situations, and we got doozies to talk about today. So after we're done running down Raw and NXT Takeover, we're going to talk about some Raws that took place during this week in, you know, past years, starting in 1997 with a crazy episode of Ahmed Johnson joining the Nation of Domination. I think the only one-on-one encounter Austin and Pillman ever had against each other in the ring took place on this show, and a really, really interesting interpromotional match involving USWA's Brian Christopher and ECW's Chris Candido. Chris Candido coming back for one night on a week that just so happened to not have Brett and Sean there because they got in the fight the week before and got sent home. Sean brought up Sunny Days on TV, and Candido was back with neither guy in the backstage area to possibly confront. Very interesting timing there. Sunny was the ring announcer for that. Very cool times. And then if you fast forward a couple of years later, in 2001, Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle had a hell of a cage match with both guys diving off the top. I was in the building for that. We're going to talk about that. And then in 2002, Steve Austin walks out and The Rock returns. So lots of cool history stuff to discuss in this episode, but we're going to save that until the end when we can just kind of shoot the shit and talk and all that stuff. First things first, we're going to get into Raw. But before we do that, let me just say hi to everybody that's hanging out here in the chat. Hopefully, we'll have a good audience tonight. We'll try to keep things fun as best as possible. And I should let you guys know the video schedule this week is going to be a little bit weird as well. You're probably going to hear from me Wednesday or Thursday. I think Wednesday I'll probably come up here with a news brief. We'll just discuss shit because on Saturday I don't think it's going to be a full-blown podcast. I'm probably just going to come up here, give a quick recap of the previous night's Dynamite, and predict Hell in the Cell. So it's going to kind of be videos broken up again. I'm changing things up this summer because my work schedule in the summer is really crazy, and I want to just try to keep the channel fresh with as much content as possible. So you just got to stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe, click the notifications bell, follow me on Twitter at Good Mic Work, all that good stuff, so you can stay tuned to what my crazy ass is doing. And then, of course, on Sunday, after the pay-per-view, I'll be up here to review Hell in the Cell. I got to work that day, too. It's Father's Day, so I got to be at work all damn day, but I'll get home just in time to watch the pay-per-view, and we'll be up here for a live stream after that. And Sunday also is the Mick Foley on Broken Skull Sessions. Probably won't get a chance to see that until after Sunday, but we'll review that at the earliest possible date here on the channel. Now I'll say hi to y'all. Zane G, here from the beginning. Good to see you. Welcome back, man. Trey Williams is here. Man, this sucks. WWE and Vince McMahon is planning on having Roman Reigns win every match for the next decade. I'm cool with that. So Cena versus Reigns is really spoiled. Reigns wins. Yeah, probably. I mean, you never know, though. But yeah, I think it feels like WWE has no intention of taking this belt off of Roman anytime soon, where normally you might think that he's ripe, you know, being that he's got a year-long run coming up. in just a couple of months, but maybe not. He might just be champ till we all die. That's fine. Ryan, this all dragged out tonight? Yeah, it kind of did, especially that main event. Jesus, I think they started it at like 25 past the hour, so you knew there was going to be shenanigans. And, of course, lots of people got involved. Commercial, impromptu tag. Wow. So creative. Domination Warrior. Appreciate the $2, dude. Gregorius, who's your favorite NXT champion of all time? That's a good question. I don't know. Smo Joe's on the list. Finn Balor. Might be Finn Balor. Because, I mean, he had 2 different stints. You know, he had one when he was, there the first time and he was doing the demon on all the takeovers. That was fucking badass. And then he came back later to win it again. So I'd have to it's going to be hard to top him. Because I liked everybody. I liked Shinsuke. I liked Sami Zayn. I liked Kevin Owens. All of them. But I'd probably say Finn Balor, unless I thought about it more and think of somebody better. But Finn Balor's probably up there, or possibly even Adam Cole, just based on the length of his run. One of them so far. Maybe Karrion Kross will make that list in the future. He ain't there yet, but maybe he will be. Good to see you as well. Jet the Hawk, Sex Machine, Michael Kumo, Slim Jim, Sam 3, Cerebrus, Joshua, Keith, Mikey, Barry MK is here. 0 out of 10, no Bailey. That's right, yeah. It's automatic 0 out of 10. Barry loves him some Bailey. Don't blame you. Steven Scott's in the house. Domination Warrior. I think I got you already. Martin Can. George Morris. Here we go. Hey, Greg. Raw 0 out of 10. WWE on Peacock is getting worse. More Raws removed. The Bruce Pritchard podcast is getting worse and worse. Haven't listened to Bruce in a while. I was actually looking at some Raws because we're doing the This Day in History segment here later, This Week in History later on. And I was on Peacock just today scrolling around the Raws, and I didn't notice any missing, but I know there are a bunch that they've pulled out of there. And overwhelmingly bad reviews so far from every WWE fan. WWE Network to me wasn't even perfect. I really struggled with the search features on that as well, but it was just still far better than what we're dealing with on Peacock. Peacock is a goddamn mess. Keith, have I taken a sip of my beer on camera? You saw my Lagunitas. I don't even remember taking a sip of it. That almost freaked me out for a second there. I'm like, are you in my house? I must have just taken a sip and not noticed. Autopilot. That's what happens sometimes. Yeah, it's good casual drinking stuff. Ciampa, best NXT champ ever. I don't know if he's the best, but I like him. Ciampa, Gargano, all those guys. Fantastic dudes, but I might go Balor, you know. Takeover was decent, says Deshaun. I just love the throwback. I mean, last year they kind of gave us In Your House because we're like, holy shit, we're in a pandemic, what the fuck? So they recycled it this year and did it again. This time they actually put fans in the arena, and I think last night, you know, I haven't watched completely the full show from beginning to end. I've only watched the important parts so I could talk about it here because I've had a really busy weekend. But the crowd was shit. And that was supposed to be a big deal. They allowed something like 300 fans back in there. And when you take and they had like no enthusiasm. They were on their phones. They weren't reacting to much. I mean, they weren't completely silent, but they sure as hell weren't loud. And, you know, he had the big video wall and the loud, you know, piped in shit before. It was a really big contrast to hear that type of silence throughout the much of the show and so little reaction that certain guys got. So it was odd. I don't know what was up with the crowd, but you would think regardless of the location, a lot of people were trying to make excuses, you know, or whatever, saying, oh, you know, once they travel, the crowds will be better. I'm like, this is like the first gathering, you know, in NXT. It doesn't matter where they are. The crowd should be pumped regardless. Those 300 fans should be excited. So why weren't they? I don't know. So it makes me worry that when they do go on the road, maybe the reactions aren't going to be what you think they're going to be. But I would just think that the crowd would be super, super happy about being there. And they weren't so much. And I think they harmed the show in a bit, even though all the matches were great. Both women's matches were really good, especially the Gonzalez and Moon match. It was good stuff, but man, I thought the crowd could have been a little bit more into it than what they were. You know what I mean? Cameron Grimes. I love Cameron Grimes. I was kind of half-assed rooting for him, but I didn't predict him to win the $1 million title. I felt it was probably best in that situation on LA Knight, and he won it. He'll look good with it. We'll see where that goes on Tuesday, and plus we've got the big bombshell that was kind of dropped or at least teased, cryptic comments from the real man's man, Commissioner Regal, at the end of TakeOver last night says, you know, as long as I've been here in 7 years, I've never seen this much bedlam. It's time for a change. And he kind of says NXT needs to change. It's also been reported, Fightful Select is where I read this, Samoa Joe has been rumored to maybe want maybe come back to the company. Triple H apparently was furious when he was let go and immediately pushed for him to return to NXT. Apparently that's been worked out, and Joe is going to be coming back. He's also, from what we understand, not medically cleared, possibly to wrestle. And if that's the case, what better position for him to have? He was a successful announcer on Raw, so we know he can operate outside of a ring as an on-air role or character. He did great in the announce booth on NXT. What about an authority figure? You know, this is a guy that's not going to let all these crazy motherfuckers go crazy in there. He's going to fit me. He might have to physically, restrain him if he has to. I thought when the Samoa Joe rumors were circling that he'd be brought in as a wrestler, and I'm like, okay, great, I'm glad to see him in NXT, but I feel like he'll just lose to Karrion Kross, if they want to get him over more. But Samoa Joe coming back as an authority figure seems to be where they're going here, because whatever they do tomorrow on NXT, if it's not that, then I don't know what the hell they teased last night. So that seems to be the big rumor. And if that's the case, I would love to see it, because I think Samoa Joe has got he's got a presence to him. He knows how to talk. And like I said, he did great in the announce booth on Mondays. So I have no doubt that he could succeed to an equal level as an authority role. And my only concern is that one thing I really liked about Regal is that he was in that role for so long. And I don't want to see NXT start having this revolving door of commissioners type of thing. I want it to kind of be old school. Jack Tunney, was the president forever, and they only used him when necessary. Regal's used a bit more than Tunney, but still, he's not out there 3 segments a night on every single show and made such a big part of the show. He's just there to make rulings when he needs to and that sort of thing. So passing that torch on to somebody else, great. I just hope it's long term, or it's short term as a way to spark a Samoa Joe in-ring return, to where if he gets cleared or whatever, maybe he is secretly cleared and we don't know that, and this thing is going to start an angle that will allow him to get back in the ring, and then maybe he passes the torch to somebody else. I mean, Shawn Michaels is there as a trainer already, and he ain't going anywhere. I think Shawn Michaels would be another great candidate for a commissioner role, because he's somebody that's there and could probably hold that role for a long time, and you don't have to worry about his contract coming up or anything like that. He's probably not going anywhere. So I would like to see the authority role in NXT remain the way it's been, to where it's not been overwhelming or in your face or anything like that. And that's the only thing that maybe worries me a little bit if Regal is stepping down, is that this is going to start a chain reaction, I hope NXT's better than the main roster when it comes to that, but hopefully it won't start a chain reaction of, okay, now Joe's out, somebody else is in, then they're out, somebody else is in. We don't need that in NXT. It sucks when they can't figure it out. So we'll see, but Samoa Joe might be on his way back. We'll talk more about that later. FRGN, what's up? Good to see you. And Jose Lopez and Transferring Heat podcast is back. Hunter Iggy, where is Mercedes Martinez? She was on the show last night, got beat by Xia Li. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But first, let's run through Raw, since we've been flapping our gums for a while. The show opens up with Alexa Bliss telling us, I guess she's in her playground. Of course, last week we saw the ridiculous main event segment involving Shayna Baszler and Alexa Bliss, and Baszler stomps Lily, and the crazy shit starts happening, and it just horror movie goofy nonsense. Everybody just completely shit on it all week long. They're calling it one of the worst, if not the worst, final closing segment in Raw history. Feels like this Alexa character has taken a couple steps back after starting out so good. So Alexa opens up the show tonight, and she says that because of what Lily did to Shayna, she was kind of surprised by what she did, and she's put her in timeout. So that's how we start Raw, by a Lily being put in timeout. Those are my first notes. I said, show opens with Alexa Bliss, puts Lily in timeout. What am I doing with my life? Nia Jax shows up, tells Alexa Bliss that Shayna Baszler will see her at Hell in the Cell. So I guess we're getting Shayna and Alexa at Hell in the Cell, and that Nia Jax will see her later on tonight, or I think she challenges her or something like that, and Alexa agrees. So we're going to get Alexa Bliss back in the ring for the first time in I don't know how long tonight against Nia Jax. So that was kind of interesting. We get Nikki Cross taking on Charlotte in the opening match here, kind of just continuing the saga with Rhea, Ripley, and Charlotte. Rhea comes out to the ring. I think during the match, she sits in on commentary for this. She winds up distracting Charlotte when Charlotte's outside of the ring, and she can't stop jaw-jacking with Rhea Ripley, and she's just not paying attention. I think the referee just counts her out. So she gets pissed, jumps in the ring, attacks Nikki Cross. Rhea Ripley jumps in there, hits the riptide on Charlotte, and, we'd be seeing Charlotte later on, because Rhea is going to face Asuka later on in the show. And, of course, it's Charlotte versus Rhea Ripley for the title on Sunday at Hell in the Cell. I don't even know who the fuck is the babyface and heel in this thing. I guess they're both heels. It's not bad. It's just only WWE can make me not care about 2 title programs that feature 4 of the best wrestlers in the company. Like, I like Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre, but I don't give a shit about their feud. I like Rhea Ripley and Charlotte. Don't give a shit about their feud. Only WWE can achieve this, because they're just, But I did like the way the pace got picked up a little bit here this week between the 2, especially later on with the pull apart. But for the most part, I haven't really enjoyed or cared much about this situation at all. So that sucks. We just need the fans back so they can start at least maybe trying to dictate a little bit what WWE does. And I can't wait to see the way they act when they try to put Jackson Ryker in front of them as a babyface, as we'll talk about later on. We cut backstage after that. We get Riddle. And, by the way, I should mention that Nikki Cross is on a 4-week winning streak now. So now she's won all these matches in bullshit ways, beat the clock stuff and the countouts and the DQs and all of that, but she has gotten her hand raised, and we've all been screaming for Nikki Cross to be used a little bit more. We're given a push. I don't know if this translates into a push. Winning 4 straight times via bullshit is more James Ellsworth-like than an actual push, but at least Cross is on TV. She deserves to be. She's got unmatched enthusiasm, and she's just a bright spot in this horrible, horrible WWE world. So give this girl a push. Jesus, man, she's awesome. Put all the belts on her as far as I'm concerned. After that, we go backstage. Orton and, Jeff Hardy's back there. Riddle approaches him, starts just spouting out a bunch of nonsense as usual. And Hardy gives Riddle some advice and says, hey, you know what? If you want my opinion, you should listen to Randy Orton. He's been here a long time. When he talks, you should listen. It's a thing. It's a matter of respect. But if you'll excuse me, I got to get ready for my match with John Morrison. And then he opens his eyes, and he's got that funny eye face paint on, and it spooks Riddle. He's like, whoa, you have 4 eyes? I wish I had 4 eyes. I could shred 2 guitars and play 2 drums, and then we could form a band and maybe get Rick Boogs to play. And Randy Orton just goes on and on and on, and he turns around, and Jeff Hardy's gone. Fucking hilarious. Love me some Riddle. I could just have those segments all night long because I need to laugh. This shit's ridiculous, man. Anyway, after the break, we come back. We get John Morrison versus Jeff Hardy. This is kind of interesting. So I think Hardy comes to the ring first. Morrison follows him. I could be wrong on that. I don't remember who came to the ring first, but Morrison's out there. The Miz is still there. Miz, of course, is injured, so he's in the wheelchair. Last week, Morrison let go of the Miz on the ramp in his wheelchair, and he started rolling down the ramp, and he was doing it during Morrison's entrance in slow motion, and it was fucking hilarious. And I was like, what I was worried about is that WWE, as they do with everything, every funny thing that they fall ass backwards into, they overdo and they ruin, like, immediately. And I thought for sure that they would do that again this week, and the Miz would roll down the ramp, and they would just play it out, and it would get old within seconds. But they didn't. They actually did they went another direction, which was equally as funny. Morrison brings out the Miz, does his entrance, and starts walking to the ring, but he forgets the Miz up on the ramp, and Miz is yelling at him in the slow motion. So they went in a different direction, but it was still fucking funny. And, that's what I think wrestlers should aspire to be. They should aspire to be the Miz, to where your value does not change, and you have a spot on TV regardless if you're injured or healthy. He has equal value both ways, whether he's in the ring or he's out of the ring. And even when he's hurt, he can just be out there being the Miz. And I think he deserves credit for that. So anyway, we go to the match here, and Morrison wins. Well, before he does, Cedric Alexander, for some reason, comes out. I think they wrestled last week. I can't remember the significance of this, but he comes out during the match. Jeff winds up losing. I think he eats Starship Pain, and Morrison beats him pretty much clean. After the match, Cedric gets on the mic, cuts a promo on him, starts talking about, what a shell of himself he is now, and, he can't cut it anymore or whatever. And Jeff grabs a microphone and says, I'll challenge you to a match right now. If I lose to you, I will retire. So we've seen Jeff losing a lot on TV lately, and now they're actually bringing up the word retirement in a match and a promo. So I don't think they would bring this up if this might not be potentially in the works. And maybe this could be Jeff Hardy wrapping up his career. Now, we go to commercial, we come back, and we have Jeff Hardy versus Cedric Alexander. During the commercial, I think a lot of people were freaking out on social media. Holy shit, is this going to be it? Is Jeff Hardy really going to retire here? I'm like, Cedric is a North Carolina boy, but I don't think so. I can't see. That's so random. I'm all for, putting over anybody, really. on your last match, but at least, Jeff, I think, deserves to have some sort of a send-off. So this might be similar to Ric Flair, or something like that, to where Jeff's really going to start questioning himself, or Cedric's going to keep pushing his buttons or whatever on TV until he agrees to another retirement match with someone else, maybe Cedric again. I don't know. By the way, Hardy did defeat Cedric Alexander here in a clean match, hit him with a swanton and beat him. But like I said, I don't think they would bring up all this retirement stuff if they weren't thinking about it. So, where would you like to see Jeff Hardy's career end? How would you like to see it end? Against who? I'd like for it to happen at SummerSlam, like mid-card, middle of the way through, dedicate a good 30-minute segment to a match and a goodbye for Jeff Hardy, where you could say goodbye to the fans, or you could just have him do it, on a TV show or something where it can be the main event or whatever. But if he could have, one more great match with somebody, and lose and retire and maybe take a backstage role or something like that, that might be nice. But it feels like they're teasing that here. So if you have ideas for his retirement, let me know. Try to keep your ideas in line with WWE, because, we might have some grand idea for Jeff, but, WWE most of the time doesn't do that. And Jeff had, like Kurt Angle, Jeff left a couple of times and went to TNA, and he's not been the model WWE employee. They've given him several chances, so I don't know how far backwards WWE is going to bend over to give him the greatest send-off in history or anything, but I think he deserves to have something nice, and he deserves to be, acknowledged as one of the greats and ride off into the sunset as, kind of a whirlwind of a story that had a happy ending, luckily. And luckily he didn't at least as of yet, hasn't let the demons get the best of him, and, finished his career strong. That's all I can think about. Unless his contract is up and he's leaving, and he goes and joins Matt in AEW. I don't know, but feels like it might be on the horizon here for old Jeff. And you can imagine with his style, you can't, he's my age, I can't imagine doing that shit as long as he has 20 plus years breaking your back. We'll see. Chris Ludecki, good to see you, man. Appreciate the $5 from you. Hey, Greg, I'm wondering your thoughts on In Your House yesterday. I was hoping Orton would have another leg-slapping tweet after the main event. I'm going to get to it. We're going to talk a little bit about In Your House. I thought it was awesome matches all night, but probably one of the more underwhelming takeovers that they've had, just because of the predictability of the matches and whatnot. But, still, takeovers are takeover. And takeovers are like sex and pizza. Even when they're bad, they're still pretty good. And last night was no different. So I still enjoyed the show, and I marked out for Todd Pettengill. I love him so much just because he was such a big part of, my being a wrestling fan in the 90s, like when I was in high school and shit, and just brings back great memories. And it's always cool to see him pop back up every now and then. We even had Doc Hendricks kind of did the voiceover at the beginning there. I'd like to see Todd and Doc hook back up for like a Action Zone reboot or something. And shout out to Beth Phoenix, too, who wore like this really awesome like gold tuxedo as a tribute to Doc Hendricks. Cool stuff. So, and even then when they did the intro, the NXT logo came up. For over 10 years, the revolutionary, whatever the fuck, those were the days. I kind of like the old promo package that they did. It was just, nostalgia is very important to me. So I enjoyed the show and the vibe and the atmosphere of it, just like we did last year. We all thought last year's In Your House was very good, too. Maybe even a little bit better in the eyes of many. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about it later on. Yeah, the karate fighters. Yeah, and all that stuff. The karate fighters, things they would used to do back in the day. So, kind of spoofing all that or tributing all of it was awesome. Was awesome. And I still haven't seen all of it. I've only seen, bits and pieces of TakeOver, trying to watch it throughout the day, because I had a lot to catch up on today, so it was hard to watch everything straight through, but I tried to catch the important stuff. So we'll talk more about it here in a minute, but we'll get back to the Raw results with where we left off with the Jeff Hardy and Cedric stuff and the possible retirement, and then we come back. We're only 45 minutes into the show here, and it's time. It's time. It's Eva time. Man, crazy. Knew something was up. The timing of this was weird. We knew she was going to be debuting, but even the date seemed odd. It seemed like they were just running these vignettes with no indication of when she was going to debut, and then all of a sudden last week they hit you with it. Debuting next week, okay. And and then you look at what time she's debuting here, 45 past the first hour. I'm like, this is an odd time. That's not even top of the hour shit. They're not even, they're making her seem like a big deal, but this is not where the segment would be, I don't think, if they were really going to debut her and get back in the ring and all this. And we knew something was up. We've been talking about this since before she debuted, because the last time we saw her, she was coming up with these excuses why she couldn't get in the ring or trying to pull fast ones. And every week would have like a new idea as to why she couldn't wrestle. And many of us speculated that she's going to return to that, because she's trolling the fuck out of us with these workout videos. I'm going to show you how good I got and all this stuff. She doesn't even get in the ring. She hasn't been in the ring in forever. I don't even know when the last time she was in a ring on TV taking bumps. Don't even know when that is. Barry, you probably do. So you knew something was up here. There's also been the reports that she's going to have some backup. She's going to have some muscle. And it was, I know it was Andrew Zarian and Sean Ross Sapp, as always. They always seem to be the ones that break this shit. But they were the ones talking about Piper Niven. She's been seen at the PC. She's been rumored to be paired with Eva and has been there working out for her debut. We've also heard the name Mercedes Martinez tossed around, but it became clear that Eva Marie was going to have a little bit of backup with her. So she debuted out here tonight, and her music hits. She comes out, and flanking her is, of course, NXT UK's Piper Niven. So the rumors were true. She's out there. They start coming down to the ring, and Piper's got a very interesting kind of attitude. She seems like she's almost like enamored and obsessed with Eva Marie. You can tell right away where this is going. Eva Marie is using her, and I've only seen her a couple of times in NXT UK, so I wasn't that familiar with her, and I loved the way she worked in the ring here. But it's supposed to be Eva Marie versus Naomi. That's the match they had advertised earlier on in the day. So Eva just comes out there. They announce Eva Marie, and then she just continues to stay on the outside of the ring while Piper Niven just jumps right in the ring, immediately attacks Naomi. For some reason, this is allowed, and the referee rings the bell, and she squashes Naomi in a matter of not even a minute, 30 seconds maybe, beats her down, gives her a nice running splash, and pins her for the win. And then they announce Eva Marie as the winner. None of this makes any sense, but it was great because this is kind of what I was hoping they would do, is continue to kind of troll us or whatever. I even thought it was interesting that she was returning in front of the Thunderdome instead of waiting until the fans come there to really boo this shit. So after Piper wins, Eva is announced as the winner. Piper gives her this big hug. Eva kind of seems turned off by it. They're already planting the seeds that she's just using this girl. And the craziest part about all of this, Jimmy Smith gets a pass, but Corey Graves and Byron Saxton not knowing who the fuck she is hysterical. Who is she? I've never heard of her before. I'm like, this is Piper Niven from NXT UK. She works for the fucking company. Like, I think it's silly that this is so classic Vince. WWE has always been guilty of this, and I don't know what it is here with her case. Like, what happens if somebody bigger comes in from NXT UK? What happens if Walter comes in? They just call him somebody else? Give him a different name? Who is that? I'm like, he's been the champion for 800 fucking days, man. What do you mean, who is that? And so she's been there for a while. Everybody should know who she is. Whenever somebody debuts from NXT, Corey always likes to announce who they are. So this clearly is for a higher up thing. This is clearly Vince saying, we're going to completely rebrand her and rename her, and we got to pretend like she's a brand new person here. But I think they made a big mistake not acknowledging her NXT UK history. That takes a shit on a brand underneath your own umbrella. You should definitely say who this is and mention it. Even if you want to change your name, fine. Say formerly Piper Niven. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of start going in that direction, if they subtly start referencing her NXT UK stuff, but it's not going to explain why they didn't know who the fuck she was here. And they've been doing this since the beginning. Anytime they bring anybody in from another company, I joked on Twitter about the Royal Rumble 1993 when Giant Gonzalez debuted, and Gorilla Monsoon is like, who is that? And Bobby Heenan is like, they don't know who he is. I'm like, don't tell me you don't watch WCW. Don't tell me you're not at least aware of WCW. You might not watch it, but I'm sure you've fucking seen El Gigante before. So the right thing to do was for Gorilla to say, who is that? And Bobby to say, that's El Gigante in a muscle suit with fur on it. I don't know what he's doing here. He must have come in, So it's just weird why they decide to acknowledge who somebody's is from their past in certain occasions and they don't others. Kind of silly here that they, didn't even reference it. What would it have hurt? What would it have hurt for them to mention who she is and where she came from? How is that going to matter anyway? At least that makes sense. They insult our intelligence way more than they need to. And that's just another example of it. I don't even know why. If there was a reason for them saying, like, for a storyline purpose that they didn't want to reference the NXT UK thing, then I could understand, but I don't see one. I don't see a storyline purpose. There's no reason. why they shouldn't have mentioned who she is, or at least what her name was. And then maybe next week she can cut a promo. I was Piper Niven in NXT UK, but I'm so-and-so here, whatever her name is going to be. We've seen plenty of people do that, change their names and shit. So they might do that with her, but I thought that was a little bit silly. But anyway, now Eva Marie's got a ton of heat. This is going to be great. I thought it was perfect booking. I don't want her to get in the ring yet. I want to tease it and tease it and tease it. Maybe she just continues to fuck with us for weeks until somebody snaps and gets a hold of her and attacks her and grabs her by the hair and forces the issue or something. And maybe that happens in front of a crowd. I mean, that would be pretty funny and pretty awesome if she would continue to do this through the duration of the Thunderdome. And maybe the first week back in front of an audience or something, somebody gets their hands on her and fucks her up. Might be fun, get a good pop from the crowd or something like that. But we'll see. As of right now, Piper Niven's going to be fighting the battles for Eva Marie. I'm sure on TV, Eva Marie will abuse her, take her for granted, maybe even make fun of her. I don't know. Something's going to happen to where Piper Niven probably will eventually go Alex Riley on her and completely annihilate her or something like that. But I think it's a good showcase and a good debut for Piper. She was smashed over, and she's pretty badass. She's going to be a pretty tough force to be reckoned with. I just worry that even though as strong as she comes off in the ring, she's going to come off weak in character because Eva is going to abuse her and take advantage of her, type of thing. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But at least for the debut, I loved it. I thought it was great. I hope it pisses fans off. And I hope she continues to do this over and over and over again. And it'll be fun when she finally does get in the ring and who that will be against and what will happen there. I don't know. Knowing WWE, they'll make it all stupid, but at least for now, I'm into it. Well, that was, by the way, can you guys smash that thumbs up button for me? I'd appreciate it. We cut backstage after that. This is so stupid. We got Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke in some photo shoot. And then you start hearing people taking bumps in the ring that's like around the corner, and they go, oh, what's that? And Natalya and Tamina just happen to be working out in the ring, and they all get in each other's face, and then there's a brawl in the ring or something. The whole thing was stupid and pointless. Great tag team matchup next with RK Bro against the New Day. Orton and Riddle back on the same page again. We get an RKO to Xavier Woods for the win. Really good match, but not much to say about it. RK Bro continue to roll. We'll see. A lot of people are calling for them to win the titles at SummerSlam. I think it'll either be SummerSlam or Money in the Bank. WWE might want to do it right when the fans come back and maybe not wait as long as SummerSlam, but they're taking the straps soon, you would think. Then we get a one-on-one match between Rhea Ripley and Asuka. This is a non-title match. You kind of thought that this was going to be very predictable. It was only 50% predictable. I just assumed, because of everything that's going on, that Charlotte would come out in this and cost Rhea the match or just calls a DQ. And we wouldn't get a clean finish here, and then it would just continue the brawl with Rhea Ripley and Charlotte. But that actually only halfway happened. They did allow the match to take place fully, and we did get a clean finish. The champion won a match with her finisher. Go figure. I was actually happy to see that, even though I like Asuka and hate to see her beat. You know, at least this wasn't completely predictable the way I thought it would be. As soon as Rhea Ripley got the fall, though, then Charlotte jumped her from behind, attacked her. All the officials empty out, and we got a big pull apart here. So I did like the intensity a little bit being picked up between these two, because really, I do like them individually as workers. Rhea Ripley and Charlotte should be a badass match. You know, I just, I haven't really cared much about their issue with each other because I'm just confused with who's who and who's doing what or whatever. So this got me a little bit more interested, and I just hope they have a good match at Hell in the Cell. That's all I care about. And if Rhea retains, which I hope she does, hopefully she'll move on to something else after that. Like maybe a feud with Alexa Bliss or something. We get Alexa Bliss taking on Nia Jax next. Alexa Bliss is back in the ring for the first time, and I don't know when. Feels like forever ago. And she's in control of Nia Jax for much of this match, because now Alexa's a little bit different. This is not the same Alexa that Nia Jax knew. Nia's got some good offense, but Alexa keeps, kind of turning the tables on her. Finally hits her with a DDT and gets her down. Goes up to hit Twisted Bliss. She nails her with it, and before she can get the 3 count, Reginald jumps in, causes the disqualification. Alexa stares him down and basically, hypnotizes him. And he's sitting there, completely hypnotized, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's staring at her, and she's tilting her head or whatever. So she might have possessed poor Reginald. Nia Jax is trying to get him to snap out of it, but he might already be cursed now. Good job, Alexa. Maybe Reginald will be a little puppet doll in the playground or something next. We'll see. After that, we go backstage to MVP and the New Day. Now, MVP's been trying to stir up shit between Kofi and Xavier for at least 2 weeks now. This might be the third. It's either the second or the third. Now he approaches Xavier and Kofi fresh off their loss from RK Bro earlier, and he's trying to talk to Kofi about how, he was great, but Kofi Mania is over and dead, and, I lost interest in it, and the reason you're not fulfilling your potential is because this guy right here, Xavier Woods, is holding you down. And Kofi cuts a promo and a very passionate speech about he loves his brothers and loves his friends. And MVP closes by saying, all right, man, fair enough. Good luck at your match on Sunday at Hell in the Cell. Oh, sorry, you don't have a match at Hell in the Cell. And walks away, and Kofi kind of thinks about it. So you're wondering, they did split them up by putting New Day on SmackDown, but they're all still brothers. Are they teasing it? Is there going to be anything to this? Or is this going to be another false flag here, and New Day just continues to stay together indefinitely forever? I'd actually be fine with that at this point. I'm starting to think of the New Day's brotherhood as like the Undertaker streak, and it's not something I necessarily want to see end because I think it would break my heart a little bit. But, if it means a bigger push for Kofi or something, or either of these guys, like Xavier Woods has gone out many times, time and time again, saying he wants to win King of the Ring, that he wants him to do a tournament and he wants to win it. So, maybe he's got aspirations to be a single star because he's phenomenal. He's just as good as Kofi. So if they are going to think about splitting these guys up, as long as you treat them right and give them legitimate pushes and put some championship belts around their waist, I'm all for it. Otherwise, I'd rather just say that, have the New Day stay together, because I think they're going to turn out to be, as I look back as a fan, the most significant tag team of this particular era. This era of just the last, 7 or 8 years, that's just extremely different than the way it used to be. You'll always remember New Day as being like a bright spot in all of this. So it's something that I'm apprehensive to accept, and we'll see. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you want it to happen or not? What would you prefer? Devlin's back. What's up, dude? Thanks for the $5. So was Raw god-awful? I didn't watch and have no intention to watch. I also just got off work. It wasn't god-awful. It wasn't great, but I think it was a little bit better and had some solid moments on the show. And they did tease a couple things storyline-wise and gave us a couple of indicators of what we're going to see on Sunday at Hell in the Cell, specifically with McIntyre and Lashley, as we'll talk about in a minute. I'm very thrilled with the outcome of the main event. I'm never a fan of WWE's pin the champion trope that they do so much, but if you do the heel and babyface pay-per-view math, generally whoever gets the last laugh on the show, on the go home, doesn't succeed in the main event. So I'm hoping that tonight painted a picture of a Lashley victory on Sunday, and I think it did. So it wasn't all bad. We've definitely had worse, but one of the greatest Raw of all time either. Who's next? Okay, I got everybody. I caught everybody up there. Where'd we leave off? That's right, MVP and New Day. MVP trying to stir up problems. I like MVP. We'll see. Maybe Kofi goes heel and joins the Hurt Business. I don't know. Seems weird. Anyway, after that, we get Elias taking on Jackson Ryker again, or as I like to call him, Mr. Merca. I think they should put a mask on him. And this is even crazier. Jackson Ryker has just completely owned Elias in the last couple of weeks. They try to do a match here again. I can't remember what happened last week, but I think it was something similar to where Elias just walked off or something. Do I have that right? So they basically did it again. Jackson is dominating Elias throughout the match, and Elias starts to get counted out. Looks like he has an option, or he has he has a chance to get back in the ring in time, but basically opts not to, doesn't want any more of the ass kicking, and then just retreats and walks away. We'll see how this shit plays out when the fans come back. I think this is completely delusional, out of touch Vince, realizing that, trying to make this guy a babyface or whatever ain't gonna work, man. Crowd's gonna boo him when they come back, mark my words. But Elias right now is being owned by Jackson Ryker. We'll see where that lands and what kind of blow off that's going to be, because this is Elias continuing to walk away. I don't think these two guys do not warrant a Hell in the Cell match. That would be ridiculous to put these two guys in the cell on Sunday. But maybe next week on Raw, there's another match with a stip. Lumberjack match is possible. Cage match is possible. Something to finally blow the situation off. That way, if they want to push Jackson as a singles, do it. Get him away from Elias and let Elias go back to singing and being interrupted and all that stuff, because that's all he does. So we'll see. And finally, that leaves us with the main event. Starts out to be the advertised match of Drew McIntyre taking on AJ Styles, which on paper I love, We had Omos out there, of course, backing up AJ. Bobby Lashley shows up, I think, as well with MVP. They're going to be at ringside as well. The match starts. They get involved a little bit. There's some interference. This prompts out the Viking Raiders to come out and back up Drew McIntyre. So they go to a commercial here, and Corey Graves goes, "How do you think this is going to affect our main event?" I'm like, "I'll tell you how it's going to affect the main event, Corey. We're going to come back from commercial, and it's going to be a tag match. Any idiot with two eyes can see this." So they go to commercial. They come back, and we don't have a tag match. I'm like, oh, the match continues, but there's still plenty of time left. I'm like, oh, they're going to do it at the next commercial break. So now the Viking Raiders are just out there at ringside to back up Drew. And of course, they wrestle another few minutes right before the commercial break. Everybody gets involved, and Lashley's involved, and Viking Raiders, and everybody's brawling or whatever. We go to commercial, and of course we come back, and it's the six-man match that we knew we were going to get. Drew McIntyre and the Viking Raiders taking on Lashley, AJ, and Omos. Ashley had to temporarily leave to go put on his gear, came back and joined AJ and Omos in the ring. Really cool spot here I actually liked, with Omos coming face-to-face with Drew McIntyre. So far, Omos has only, tossed around the New Day guys and stuff like that. He hasn't come face-to-face with a big, beefy, strong top title contender, you know what I mean? So he comes face-to-face with Drew. Drew goes for a headbutt or something. He just stops him, grabs him by the throat, and, Drew can't really... Drew's trying to fight out of it, kicking his legs and everything, and Omos, continues to get the better of it, but Drew fights back a little bit, backs up Omos a little bit, and I think he's able to tag out or whatever. So a little bit of a scuffle there, and it was a way for, Omos to be put over in terms of how he can kind of manhandle somebody like Drew, former heavyweight champion, but at the same time, Drew was able to get a few licks in on Omos and at least drive him back, and it's the first time you've really seen Omos take any sort of serious punishment at all. The finish was interesting. Lashley, I think AJ is in the ring. He's all disoriented, getting his ass kicked. He goes to dive to tag Omos, but he misses. And instead, he misses Omos, and then he just reaches up and tags the first body he can, which turns out to be Lashley. Lashley looks surprised, gets in the ring, and he's kind of looking at AJ like, "What'd you tag me for? Omos is right there." And then he turns around and bam, eats a Claymore by Drew McIntyre right to the face, and McIntyre pins him for the win. So McIntyre pins the champion here. He and the Viking Raiders reign supreme. And to me, that tells me that on Sunday in the cell, you should see Bobby Lashley retain the title, which is a huge relief for me. I fucking hate it when they pin champions, but in this case, I can almost bear it, because that just tells me that Lashley's going to win. I really think he would. He is. I mean, I think if Lashley was going to drop the belt in the cell, I think he'd be the one to get the big victory here. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that it means a Lashley victory, and we can count on Bobby Lashley being champion going into SummerSlam. To me, that's the best option. Sets up for a really fun potential match with a lot of interesting options there for SummerSlam. So I think that's what you should continue to do. And now it looks like that's probably the case. So in terms of Hell in a Cell this Sunday, 5 matches I have written down. There's only 4 on WWE.com, but I feel like they announced Alexa Bliss and Shayna Baszler tonight. So we got Alexa and Shayna, it seems like, at Hell in the Cell. We also have Bianca Belair defending the SmackDown title against Bayley. Rhea Ripley defending the Raw title against Charlotte. Bob defending the WWE title against Drew. And Roman defending the Universal title against Rey Mysterio. I'm going to guess here that Roman and Rey will open the show. I think. Feels like they will. It's going to be an awesome match. We've heard the story of Roman's either going to be first or last on every pay-per-view. And based on everything going on with Drew and Bob, I feel like, that should be their blow-off. That should dominate the main event, and Roman and Rey should go off on first, because I think that's going to be the better match. I think Roman and Rey is going to be the far better Hell in the Cell match. Should be fun as hell. And then you do that one first and then close with Drew and Bobby Lashley. But you never know. Who knows what they're going to do? And so far, we got 3 women's matches, it looks like, on the card as well. They'll add to that on Friday, I'm sure. Nothing for the IC or U.S. title yet. Sheamus is probably still not ready to rock, but he might be. Or no, they would announce that tonight. So, yeah. Probably 1 or 2 matches left. And then it's almost time. The next pay-per-view on the calendar after we get over this one on Sunday, there will be fans there, and that's going to make a huge difference. I can't wait. Zane G, appreciate the $20 from you, dude. I know that this is Raw, but Takeover was awesome, but I felt like the Fatal 5-Way could have been extended and they could have done more. I thought Cross was going to lose since he rumored to be on the main roster. Thank you for that very much, Zane. Yeah, we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. I'm going to talk about that Fatal 5-Way, which I did like it. I thought it was well booked. They could have gone a little longer with it, maybe. And the rumors of Cross going to the main roster, I can see that. But I just didn't feel like this was going to be the time. They were in a perfect position here because they could essentially take the belt off of Cross without beating him. But I thought it would have just been too quick. I just hope they hold off a little bit on the main roster stuff. I mean, I'm talking like after SummerSlam, unless they can't get Brock back or something, or they can't get that big marquee match. Maybe they bring Cross in to, challenge one of the champions or something. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of deja vu, Jose, when it comes to WWE. There's a whole lot of that. My God. All right, let's get into, now that I've got all that knocked out, we talked about the Hell in the Cell card. We will talk more about that this week. I'll be up here on Saturday to give you guys predictions for Hell in the Cell, so keep a lookout for that, and we'll run down what I think is going to happen. But before we get to some of the fun stuff for tonight, some of the this day in history or this week in history Raw stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about last night's In Your House. Like I said, I thought the show was extremely predictable. I was 5 for 5 in my predictions, got them all right. I can't really brag about that because I think a lot of people got them all right. It wasn't that hard of a pay-per-view to predict, but I still thought it was a good show. And when you have predictable shows like this, a lot of times the talent can come through and make you forget all about that predictability and say, wow, there's some goddamn good fucking wrestling on this show. And this show gave it to us for the most part. Like I said, loved the vibe, loved the old school intro, even Todd with the VCR and shit. And when he was backstage and he was approached by, I forget her name now, and he calls her Stephanie Wyand. He goes, oh, hi, Stephanie. And she goes, no, I'm Clarissa, or whatever her name is. And then he goes, I never had chemistry with Stephanie Wyand, which is funny because he really didn't. Stephanie only lasted about a couple of months there, and she was out. But really like kind of the old school intro. Love the old like kind of 95, promotional, production music that they used, and with Doc Hendricks kind of voicing and narrating the intro, and Todd Pettengill being a part of that, doing backstage stuff throughout the show was just a lot of fun. I just desperately miss Todd Pettengill. I just always enjoyed him. And Beth Phoenix was out there looking awesome in the Doc Hendricks inspired outfit. Really cool vibe on the whole show. I liked it. Bronson Reed and MSK did wind up defeating Legado del Fantasma to retain all of their titles. Didn't feel like they were going to switch all those titles in this particular match. Both of these champions are relatively new. MSK just won that tournament and the titles not long ago. And Bronson Reed, just beat Gargano not that long ago either. So it didn't feel like it was really time here for any of that to go down. So they retained. Happy they did. Xia Li defeated Mercedes Martinez. I'm not quite sure what the hell's going on with I haven't followed this super close, so I'm a little confused about this whole storyline, so I got to look more into it than this. But I know Xia Li, she's really been, since all this stuff has been going on with her, since she's had this transformation, she's turned into a legit killer, and she kind of feels like almost like a female Karrion Kross in a lot of ways, just very, very, very dangerous, and I like that vibe. And she took down Mercedes Martinez, somebody that's pretty damn tough in her own right, and at the end, Martinez got thrown off into the barricade. That was all pretty good. The ladder match was good too. LA Knight and Cameron Grimes, I think, believe it or not, on the show, this is just the one I was looking forward to the most, just because it was the $1 million title and, how old that belt is, and I just kind of like the whole deal, and I'm a big Grimes fan. I think he's hilarious. LA Knight, I thought, would be a perfect candidate to hold that belt, especially when he kind of patterns his promo style after Austin and a little bit of Rock too. But Austin, was, I think, the last guy to hold that $1 million title. I think there's only been 4 champions: DiBiase, Virgil, Austin, maybe somebody else, and now the winner of this match. Good match. Finish saw Grimes up at the top. LA Knight just picks up the ladder, tips it backwards. They had a couple of ladders in the ring, I think, that were gimmicked, that they were crashing through and stuff, and they had the big gold one that they used for the majority of the time. So Grimes is up there, inches away from victory, but he takes a flat or hard back bump when Knight pushes the ladder over right onto the ramp, onto ladders. Very sick. He wasn't going anywhere. He was out cold. LA Knight just has to casually climb up to the top, unhook the glass transparent briefcase that was holding the title, and DiBiase was at ringside, congratulated him after the match, and it looks pretty cool. I think this is going to be a good thing for LA Knight. Should be fun to see him as the $1 million champion. Don't know how long any of this is going to last, what the shelf life is on this belt, if this is going to be a championship that's going to be now actually defended, if they're going to do a deal where they're going to sanction this title, or if it's going to be more along the lines of the FTW title, to where it doesn't matter if he wins or loses, he's just going to keep it anyway. We'll see. At some point, I'm sure he might lose the title, maybe to win it back, and then maybe there will be a falling out with DiBiase, and DiBiase repossesses the title. Maybe Repo Man comes in to repossess the title. He's done that before. I think that's how DiBiase beat Virgil for it. I think Repo Man was out there as a part of something, so you could bring him back in for fun, and he can maybe repossess the title and give it back to DiBiase, and they send LA Knight on his way. Repo Man, Barry Darso, Demolition. Speaking of Demolition, best wishes out to Bill Eadie. Saw a couple of tweets from some people. Sounds like he might be in some poor health. I know he's had some issues in the last couple of years. And I saw a little bit of Bill Eadie today. I was watching the WWE Treasure show with Paul White and Mark Henry, a couple of AEW guys. There's a lot of AEW talent on this Treasure show that they filmed. Jake Roberts was on it, and I think somebody else too. And they're looking for Andre stuff. So if you haven't seen that one, it's really good. It's a 2-hour long episode. Really fun shit if you haven't seen that. But they showed a picture of DiBiase as the champion, the WWE champion in that, and they had a lot of history of DiBiase and Andre on all that shit. So good shit. Hey, Lovell, I just saw that one. I'm going to nail that one in a minute because I had another note on the Grimes LA Knight stuff. There we go. Yeah. So, that was the question I was going to pose to you guys is like, how long do you think that's going to be hanging around, in terms of the title belt? I can't see them just having that be a permanent fixture, with LA Knight. He can't hang on to it forever. Something's just going to happen storyline wise, and it's going to be like a temporary thing. Maybe just used to get him over. I don't know. But anyway, after that, we got Raquel Gonzalez defending the NXT Women's title against Ember Moon. This might be the best match on the show. Many people said that it was. They said they put this match right there on the top with all the action, and I can't disagree. Pretty good. Raquel was put over and is an absolute monster here. Ember Moon is a really good quality challenger for Raquel, but at the same time, the predictability factor of this, we knew that Ember Moon wasn't going to be a realistic person to take the title off of Raquel Gonzalez right now. A lot of these champions in NXT are new, so they're just not ripe enough yet for really any title switches at the moment. So the best we could hope for here is a really solid match. It was. Raquel looked like a boss and she retained the title. Good stuff. And that left us with the main event, of course. Karrion Kross has to defend the title, or he wants to defend the title, I should say, against all 4 guys that he's had issues with in recent weeks: Johnny Gargano, Adam Cole, Pete Dunne, and Kyle O'Reilly. Fatal 5-way match here, all over the place. I thought this match was really well booked and did a good job of showcasing Karrion Kross and showing how close he could come to losing the title. A couple of guys nearly had this thing won had it not been for a save or whatever. In the end, I think it's O'Reilly who's got the submission locked on Adam Cole. Adam Cole is about to tap. Everybody else is out of the ring. They're right in the middle, and Kross comes up from behind O'Reilly, who's got the submission on Cole, and locks him in the cross jacket, and O'Reilly just does a great job of selling it. I mean, he's slobbering, he's drooling, his eyes are rolling in the back of his head, and he's just kind of slumped down, and the referee calls for the bell, and Kross kind of slid in there and grabbed him. I kind of like the finish because so many times in matches like this, you see somebody hit their finisher, and then somebody will scurry in from the bottom rope and throw them out of the ring and then dive on and capitalize on the finisher. I thought that's what they were going to do, like they do in so many of these type of matches, but this was different, and I thought it was a good way to end it because you want Kross to succeed here because this is going to be bragging rights because he can now say, oh, I beat all these NXT, the NXT Mount Rushmore or whatever, and that's good, have them beat these guys in a fatal 5-way. Now who's left? I got no challengers now. I already beat you fuckers, so we'll see what's next for Kross. But the match itself, had a really kind of quiet reaction from the audience, as many of these matches did, and I think the more disappointing one was the main event because nobody really had great responses here from the fans really across the board, but Karrion Kross was particularly strange because even though he's a heel, he got like no reaction at all. So I know there's just 300 fans there. I mean, how loud can you really be? But it makes me wonder, what fans are going to think of him when he goes back on the road. He's very believable, and I love his character and all of that. But we've said since the beginning that Karrion Kross, is not as good in the ring as some of these other guys, but he doesn't really need to be. Brock Lesnar does not need to do fucking Spanish flies and shit. He is Brock Lesnar. So you don't need him to do anything crazy. So the fans that have an issue with him not doing Spanish flies, that's not really what he's built to do. But at the same time, he does show some weaknesses in the ring a little bit. But this is all stuff that he'll just get better with. He's not, he's in the system now. He's going to have some great matches. He's on takeovers. So far, his matches, I think, have all been really good. His matches with Balor, his matches here, he's had great talent to work with. And, he's had moments of really, of greatness where he's looked really, really good, and he's also had moments where you can kind of see, maybe a couple in-ring flaws, but it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. Just book this guy like a monster. You should have no issues. The money is there. So we'll see once they start traveling, what kind of, reaction he's going to generate from the audience and how the Smarks are going to react to him because, they like to reject everything. So we'll see, how that all goes. I just hope that everything works out the best for him, which is why I'm in no rush to see him out of NXT and up to the main roster because they fuck everybody up. And Cross is not exempt from that. People are like, oh, he'll be fine. No, he won't. So I don't know how you're putting an awful lot of faith in the old man. He's nobody is exempt or impervious to Vince's fuck upage. He can do it to anybody. Does not matter who, as we've seen. So we'll see. But Cross is still your champ now that all these guys, at least for the moment, unless one of them circles back to get a title shot here, who's Cross's next challenger in front of him at the next takeover? Who is it? Who is it, y'all? I should mention, of course, like we talked about earlier on, after the match, we cut to the parking lot. William Regal's out there. He says that in his 7 years of being commissioner, or is he commissioner? What's his role? Or general manager, whatever the fuck it is, in NXT, he's never seen this much bedlam and this much insanity, so he thinks there's time for a change. And that's how the show goes off the air. And it's now been reported that Samoa Joe, according to Meltzer anyway, said that he is back with the company. And apparently he's going to be the one that's going to be used as the authority role to potentially take over for William Regal here, which I think is going to be great because Samoa Joe was great on commentary. I have no doubt he'll be equally as good in an authority role. But it's also kind of a sad day. Regal's been there for a long time. So if he's going to pass the torch, Joe is a little bit more, maybe assertive than Regal. Regal's a tough son of a bitch, but he's also a tough older son of a bitch. Samoa Joe is a guy that can still probably intimidate and won't be intimidated. And if he has to get in there to, lay down the law, he might be the best guy and the best voice. Samoa Joe's even got that voice, that's perfect for this, tailor-made for this type of role. So if that's the case and if that's what they're doing, we're going to find that out tomorrow night. It seems likely. If it doesn't turn out to be Samoa Joe, I don't know what the hell Regal was even talking about. And as we talked about earlier, Joe, I don't think he's cleared to return to the ring, so this is a good role for him. Or if he is returned to the ring, if he is cleared to return, maybe this is a role that, kicks off a storyline to put him back in the ring. And then after that, you need to change the commissioner again. HBK is there. I think Shawn Michaels would be a great future authority role for NXT because he can talk. He's been a commissioner before, and just like Regal, and he'd make a lot of sense. So we'll see. But if Regal feels like he can't control everything, then I think Samoa Joe is a better choice than Shawn. Because what can Shawn control? Hopefully 9 Marines aren't in the ring, trying to fight each other because he might have a hard time controlling that. So Samoa Joe might just be a little bit tougher in that role. And if Regal needs somebody tougher, bigger, badder to step in and lay down the law, Sheriff Joe, I think, is a lot better than Sheriff Michaels. I think Joe should get a 4-wheeler and ride his ass around the CWC. That would be fun. So we'll see if that pans out tomorrow night on NXT. We'll talk about it this week if Regal does do what we think he will do. Let me cruise back over here to the chat and knock out these super chats that came in. A-Level, very generous $20 drop. I appreciate that, dude. Thank you so much. Hey, Greg, what's up? Hope all is well. Just finished listening to your review of the Bret Hart A&E biography. It was absolutely amazing. Thank you for all your hard work and great content. Bret is the reason I started watching wrestling. I loved that biography. Many people are saying it was the best one. I appreciate those comments. I wanted to dedicate a whole entire stream to that one. We talked about all the previous biographies in parts, during the podcast here and stuff. I didn't really dedicate any, one video to any of them except for Bret. I thought that was going to be a really interesting episode, and it was, and it didn't give us a whole lot of stuff we didn't know, but it was a really nice presentation of Bret's career and what he went through. And the heartwarming stuff at the end, with the family, to see Brett, growing old now, and he's married, and his family's a grandpa, and all that stuff is just nice to see as somebody, like us that watched Brett for so many years. So appreciate that. It was a fun one to do, and I love always talking about Bret Hart. His name's going to come up here a little bit later, a couple times when we talk about our This Week in History segment. Richard, you thought Fatal 5-Way was the best match at TakeOver? Yeah, I can agree with that. I liked it. Cross doesn't suit NXT. Maybe. I guess they really haven't had one like him there. It's always been, the workers title and stuff like that, and he doesn't do a lot of those things, but I can live with that. I'm all about variety, I don't think the NXT title doesn't have any sort of definition to me. I just want the shit to be good, the matches to be good. I want you to have strong champions. That's all I really care about. So far, I'm not jumping off the Cross bandwagon. I'm still on it. So it sounds like some people are jumping off. Maybe I'll jump off in the future, but right now I'm still on it. I'm cool with what's going on. Michael Cuomo, appreciate the 5 from you. Good to see you back. Ted's son, Ted Jr. Also, that's right. Carried the $1 million title for a brief while. Shame Ted Jr. didn't become a huge star. It was funny. You thought Ted Jr. of the two, of him and Cody, was going to be the star. It was one of those rare Jannetty reversals where you think one guy's going to be the Jannetty. Actually, nobody ever thought Cody was going to be a Jannetty. Cody was always good. But Jr. felt like he had a little bit more potential even than Cody did to really make it to the top in WWE. I thought he was good in the ring. He looked a lot like his dad. I loved the legacy and the family history and everything. Just didn't work out, didn't pan out. And it's a shame. I liked him a lot. I always liked Ted Jr. Cameron Grimes is destined to be an enhancement talent on the main roster. Sadly, you are probably right. I'm in no rush to see Cameron Grimes go to the main roster because he will be on Raw chasing R-Truth around, or he's just going to be doing silly shit in the back. And they've got a good balance here with Grimes. He's almost like the NXT's version of Matt Riddle, to where he does goofy shit, but he's in meaningful matches. So if he goes to the main roster, I don't think he'll be like Riddle. I think he'll be more of a joke there, and he's probably just better off staying there. But at some point, they're not going to be able to resist bringing him up there and making him a complete comedy act, which he is. He just pulls it off better, and it's more entertaining in NXT. SmackDown or Raw will just destroy it and ruin it. Keith Lee should return to NXT. I agree. Keith Lee and Cross would be fun, to see round 2 with those guys. But I don't know where Keith Lee is. But yeah, I'd like to see Cross just continue to run, and hopefully, the only thing that might derail him is, them wanting him on the main roster sooner than NXT's willing to give him up. But we'll see. We'll see. Sounds like he's going to turn into another one of those wrestlers that's going to be just one of those super debated topics, which is in wrestling Twitter and in general, which is going to be stupid and annoying. But it is what it is. I still like Cross. Anyway, that should wrap it up for all the current stuff. We got through In Your House, talked about all of that. We kind of glossed over that, but then again, I haven't watched the entire show yet either. Just a busy weekend for me. We talked about Hell in the Cell. That'll be coming up this Sunday. You're going to be getting your predictions from me on Saturday. I'll be up here with a news brief Wednesday or Thursday, probably Wednesday, so we can discuss what happened tomorrow night on NXT if William Regal did, in fact, announce a new authority figure in NXT. And who that turns out to be. We'll be here Wednesday to talk about that. So just keep that in mind. Let's move on now to some of our fun stuff. And this is something that I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks due to the lackluster nature of Monday Night Raw and these very underwhelming, predictable, rinse and repeat, redundant shows that they give us week in and week out. And we still have a full month of the Thunderdome left before the live audience returns and tries to hopefully add some spice to these shows. Until then, I really feel like we're going to be treading water and, nothing that exciting is going to go on. So what we've decided to do here on the channel is to do a This Week in Raw History segment. We're going to do this going forward pretty much every week. We're going to talk about famous matches, famous segments, famous moments in previous years on Monday Night Raw during the weeks. So I've looked up a bunch of results here, and we got some interesting ones to talk about tonight. These are interesting, and they go all the way back to 1997. We're going to talk about a show from 2001 and a show from 2002. So we basically have three and a half, kind of 4-ish shows to discuss here in terms of history stuff. And if you guys have memories about any of this, just let me know. It should be a fun discussion and fun to look back at some of this stuff. And if it goes well, I'll splice these out, upload them as mic drops on the channel or something like that. But as soon as we'll get into that here in just a minute, as soon as I answer another super chat or two, and then we'll get into that. Serbius Corpse 97, appreciate the 5 from you, man. My sister got to see the Rhea and Asuka match. She hasn't seen wrestling since the early 2000s, and she was so impressed. It was funny to watch. That's cool. I'm blown away if there's ever a story about somebody just stumbling across wrestling and actually liking what they see. If you're a non-fan or a fan that hasn't watched in forever, I would think if the last time she watched was early 2000s, the shit was pretty good back then. So for her to watch it now and to still think it's good, maybe even better, and impressed, that's good. That's a good sign. Because, man, I can't imagine. Cross could have been the Fiend's Kane, but they humanized him. Well, he is a human. RK Bro was awesome tonight. I agree. RK Bro is my favorite part of the show. Anyway, let's get into this week in Raw history. We're going to start with a great show back in 1997, 24 years ago this week on June 16th, 1997. We had a really interesting Monday Night Raw. This was 1 week after the King of the Ring pay-per-view. This was also 1 week after the famous Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart fight in the locker room that took place in Hartford. And Bret pulled all of Shawn's hair out. Shawn left and didn't want to come back, and I think Bret was sent home. And I don't recall, I think Bret would be off of TV until Canadian Stampede when he'd return to the ring, unless he was there on crutches or something during the build. But I think he was off TV until Canadian Stampede due to all of the drama and all of that shit with Shawn Michaels. But there was a lot of interesting stuff on this show that is going to be really fun to talk about, namely the main event. And the main event was The Undertaker teaming up with Ahmed Johnson to take on the Nation of Domination. Now, The Undertaker had just successfully defended the title against Farouk at the King of the Ring, and they had kind of been teasing this with Ahmed, and I remember at the time kind of smelling this as a possibility, because this is the main event here, and it's Taker and Ahmed, and when the match starts, it's Taker and Ahmed Johnson against Farouk and Godfather, I believe, so, or Kama Mustafa at the time. So during the match, Vince McMahon and the announcers are speculating as to who the new Nation member is going to be, because I believe that Farouk had teased a new member joining the group. So they're throwing out crazy names like Abdullah the Butcher and the Junkyard Dog, which was just hilarious. They were just trying to think of black wrestlers to join the Nation of Domination. I'm like, what about Owen Hart? But he was already in a faction back then. But during the match, they're kind of speculating to that throughout the whole thing. Undertaker does all of the work in the main event. He doesn't even tag Ahmed Johnson in at any point. And he's overwhelmed. Farouk and Kama Mustafa get the better of him. Kama hits Taker with his finisher, kind of like his side suplex belly-to-belly type of thing, and pins him. Right there in the middle of the ring, Undertaker gets pinned by his friend Charles Wright, and the match is over. The Nation retreats. They hop outside of the ring. They start walking up the ramp. Ahmed Johnson is the one that kind of scares them off when they want to continue the attack on The Undertaker, and he stands over The Undertaker's body, and you knew it. You could see it. It's still kind of surprising in storyline that Ahmed turned because he had such a bitter rivalry with the Nation, but you could still see that this was going to happen because he never even got tagged into the match. Didn't even get in there. He still had his baby oil all over his body. So, of course, Nation is up on the ramp. Ahmed helps The Undertaker up right into Pearl River plunge position, lifts him up, nails him with the plunge, and walks out of the ring, joins the Nation of Domination on the stage and, does the salute and the whole deal. And Ahmed Johnson joins the Nation of Domination. And I remember, and turns heel. And I remember, figuring that this was probably the right thing to do because Ahmed, I think, could make a good heel. But I remember just being so bummed out because, my God, did Ahmed Johnson get derailed the previous year. He was so hot. I liked Ahmed when he came in, even though he didn't really know what he was doing. He had this big look. He just had this amazing look about him, and WWE had just lost or was on the verge and cusp of losing, Razor Ramon and Diesel. Vince needed to make some new guys. He needed to make new top 5 guys because he was going to be losing a couple, and Ahmed had a great debut at the Survivor Series in 1995, had a great early 1996, was winning most of his matches, and then when we got to the King of the Ring in 96, he beat Goldust for the Intercontinental title. I remember being happy for him, and he had that kind of friendship with Shawn Michaels. And the two of them were champion. By this time, Diesel and Shawn were gone, or Diesel and Razor were gone, and Shawn was there kind of running with Ahmed a little bit. And then right before Ahmed got hurt, he won like a battle royal on Raw that was going to earn him a championship match. So as Intercontinental Champion, he won a battle royal that was going to earn him a match against Shawn, his friend. And looking back, I would have loved to see that match play out. Probably would have been the best match of Ahmed's career. Would Shawn have put him over? Probably not. No, I don't think so. But they were giving Ahmed that match. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, that's kind of a big match. You know, Ahmed's might be taking his first loss here. And it's interesting, too, since they're both baby faces and they kind of both get along and they're both champions. That's going to be a major match on Monday Night Raw, but it never happened because he was attacked by Farouk, a debuting Farouk with the blue helmet, got a kidney injury and had to go get surgery. And from then on, he was never the same. He came back a little bit slower, felt like his intensity and his drive was gone a little bit. And then they just decided to turn him heel against The Undertaker. So he turned heel here. And he was set to face Undertaker at Canadian Stampede and then got injured, I believe, and couldn't make that match. And I think Vader had to take his place or something, if I remember right. And then it wasn't shortly after that that they kicked Ahmed Johnson out of the Nation of Domination as well. So he didn't even last in the Nation for very long, and he was right back to being a babyface again, but he never even came close to achieving what he had when he was first over, when he first came in. I felt like he had potential at that time, and that injury just fucked everything up. So this was not peak Ahmed Johnson, and turning him heel here was kind of a waste and never really amounted to anything. But it was an interesting segment. That was in your main event of this show. But I think the more interesting stuff came on the undercard of the show. For one, we got what I believe is the only one-on-one match in the WWE between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Brian Pillman. They had set this up for weeks in advance. They were supposed to wrestle, I think, at King of the Ring, and then Austin was going to wrestle Brett instead. No, Brett was going to wrestle Shawn. That's right. Brett was going to wrestle Shawn, but his knee injury wasn't fully healed. So they had to change the match, put Steve in the ring with Shawn, and change the scheduled Austin and Pillman match at King of the Ring, move it to Raw instead. So I think that's what happened here. We finally got this match one-on-one. Of course, Pillman was not himself. He was only a few months away from passing away here. He was in a lot of pain. He was not who he once was in the ring because of the automobile accident and all that stuff. So, him and Austin didn't have that good of a match here, but it was a brutal match because during the commercial break, Austin shoved a chair in Pillman's face, broke his nose, smashed Pillman's nose. He got blood all over his face. Match goes about 10 minutes. Austin, out of nowhere, just low blows or stuns the referee and then gets hit with a low blow by Pillman. And during this match, they have all of the members of the Hart Foundation handcuffed to ringside, everybody except Brett. So you got Owen, Neidhart, and Davey all handcuffed to the ring posts during this. So after the referee gets knocked out by Austin, who hit him with a stunner, Owen Hart pickpockets the referee. Vince McMahon goes, look at that pickpocket, Owen Hart. Pickpockets the ref, gets the key out, unlocks himself, runs over, passes it to Neidhart, who unlocks himself and then runs over and unlocks Davey. They all swarm the ring and attack Austin, and he's just getting pummeled and worked over, and then then Mankind comes out there to make the save, followed by the LOD, followed by Goldust. All these guys just kind of run out there, and this was right after, and Ken Shamrock is another one. This is right after the Hart Foundation had issued the challenge for Canadian Stampede for America to pick their 5 best American wrestlers to face us, the entire Hart Foundation, in our hometown in Calgary at the Canadian Stampede in your house pay-per-view. And as the babyfaces come out there to make the save and run off the Hart Foundation, Goldust is the one that gets on the mic and says, hey, Hart Foundation challenged any 5 guys to face them at the pay-per-view. Well, looking in this ring right now, I think we are those 5 guys. So Goldust basically accepts the challenge. Austin's even okay with it. He says he doesn't need anybody, but he'll team up with them for one night because Gorilla, or maybe not Gorilla by that point, they won't let him go alone, and they won't let him do it on his own. He even has a little brawl with Ken Shamrock. So these guys still have beef with each other, and they got to try to team up. So they basically set the stage here for the Canadian Stampede main event, which to this day, many people feel is one of the best pay-per-view main events of all time, because the crowd damn near, when they say blow the roof off the building, that's usually like just a figure of speech. They literally almost blew the roof off of the building. There's never been a louder just ovation. The building, the camera, everything was shaking, during that initial part of that match. And it was probably the hottest crowd, one of the hottest crowds, maybe aside from Money in the Bank 2011 in WWE history. It was fucking insane, and it was so fun, and it was cool to see all of that set up here on this Raw. So if you want to take a look back at it, it's June 16th, 1997. Really fun episode and all sorts of stuff going down, despite the fact that there was a lot of internal stuff going on behind the scenes. Shawn was gone. Nobody thought Shawn was going to be back because, like I said, the week before was when him and Brett got into that fight, and that's when Shawn famously barged into Vince's dressing room with a handful of his hair and threw it down on the table and said, "This is an unsafe working environment. I want the fuck out of here." That same night, Nitro was in Boston. People feared that Shawn would get right in his rental car and drive straight to Nitro because they were in Hartford. Probably could have made it in time and walked out there in the middle of Nitro with his buddies on TV, like fuck WWE. It would have been crazy if that would have happened. So there was some turmoil. Brett was sent home. Shawn, had issues, and all that was going on, and that was stemming from Sunny Days. The Sunny Days comment that we all remember that Shawn Michaels said on Raw that sparked that fight in the locker room. Speaking of Sunny Days, Sunny was out here tonight to be the guest ring announcer for an extremely interesting match that I completely forgot about. This was back when WWE was still doing the deal with ECW. Rob Van Dam was there. It was there as Mr. Monday Night, and they were doing the crossover with the pay-per-views. Heyman was making occasional appearances. This all kicked off way back in February and lasted until about the summertime here. And this really interesting interpromotional match between USWA's Brian Christopher taking on ECW's Chris Candido. This is just nuts to me. I remember Candido coming in to work a match during all this stuff, but I forgot that it was right here and in this particular situation. This was super interesting because Chris Candido, Shawn Michaels was hooking up with Sunny. She was cheating on Chris Candido with Shawn Michaels. And Candido was now in ECW, and you always Candido beat the shit out of Shawn Michaels if they ever got in a fight. I am convinced. Not sure if Candido could take Brett, but he would have a reason or beef with Brett because, Brett and Sunny were just friends. Not the case with Shawn and Sunny. So it is interesting that Candido was brought in to work this match just a week after the fight, because it would have been interesting if Candido came in and Shawn was there, and fucking my girl, how about I just beat the shit out of you or whatever? I don't know. I just found that interesting that, boy, it is good timing that they didn't decide to do this match 2 weeks prior or a week prior when Shawn was actually there. Now Shawn's gone and Brett's gone. There's nobody confront. There's no weirdness or whatever, I guess. And it was just really interesting timing. And Sunny doing the ring announcing for this was even funnier. So really interesting match here. In a way, when you look back, WWE is almost playing the role of AEW here. Where WCW was crushing them in the ratings. They had the better talent roster. All the big names were there. WWE was kind of still in a rebuilding mode, sort of. They hadn't quite gotten there yet, but they would be the following year with the Attitude Era and stuff. And they had to do other things to, keep fans interested and do things that the other show wasn't. One of those things were having a working relationship with ECW to where they can do some talent exchanges, and same thing with USWA, just like AEW is doing now with NWA and Impact. It's kind of the same thing here, and this was just a really interesting match, Candido and Brian Christopher. Now, Paul Heyman, this has to be seen to be believed. Paul Heyman's on commentary for this, and as a guest, and when Candido comes to the ring, Vince McMahon asks Paul Heyman, he says, "Mr. Heyman, what can you tell us about this Chris Candido?" I'm like, dude, he used to work for you. He was Skip. Don't you remember Skip and Sonny, the Body Donnas? How do you fucking not remember this? So Heyman even says, he goes, this is an example of a guy that left the World Wrestling Federation for Extreme Championship Wrestling, and Candido's out there with the thing. But I don't think they really even referred to him as being Skip in this match. Maybe Heyman did. But Vince asking that question is so absurd. It's like how we talked about on Raw tonight with Corey Graves not knowing who Piper Niven was. I'm like, hello? How the fuck do you not know this? Vince asking this same question all these years ago. WWE has always been guilty of this stuff. How does Vince not say, oh, I remember this guy. He was Skip. He was one half of the Body Donnas. How does Vince not remember? I found that to be hilarious. And then Paul Heyman also spills the beans in a shoot that Brian Christopher is Jerry Lawler's son. I'm going to tell you right now, Brian Christopher is Jerry Lawler's son, and kind of lets the cat out of the bag there, even though we already knew that. And during the match, we go just a few minutes in. Lawler actually does a run-in. He comes out to the ring, jumps in the ring, Brian Christopher gets DQ'd, so Candido wins via disqualification. Rob Van Dam joins Jerry Lawler in the ring along with Brian Christopher to beat down Chris Candido. Tommy Dreamer jumps in the ring to help out and kind of run off the heels there. So this was still in the middle of the ECW stuff and the war that was going on there. And Dreamer came in, and we had seen Dreamer once or twice on Raw, but he, actually jumped the barricade here. And this would not be the last we would see of them, because later on in the show, Rob Van Dam and Lawler would team up in a tag team match against the Headbangers, and you got Paul Heyman back there at ringside again with Tommy Dreamer. They jump the barricade, get involved during the match, Heyman and Dreamer, and that's when the Sandman shows up. He hops the barricade and winds up hitting Lawler with the Singapore cane, allowing the Headbangers to hit their finisher for the win and get the victory there. So that whole situation was continuing, and that would spill over into ECW pay-per-views, and I know Lawler was at a couple of those. So that, to me, I just found to be a really, really interesting match. Chris Candido coming back for one match to work on Raw as a part of another company to take on another wrestler who's under contract to a different company that's not the WWE. I'm sure Christopher was also under contract to WWE, but kind of interesting to see that match at that time. I had remembered it, but I guess it just didn't really dawn on me how interesting the timing of this match was. So I thought that would be a really fun thing to discuss here, was the Candido stuff, because he was awesome. I always liked Candido. He had a great gimmick in ECW because it was no gimmick. It was no gimmicks needed. Chris Candido, because it was ridiculous what they made him do in WWE. He started making a name with Tammy Sitch in the USWA, and Smoky Mountain. I think they worked as well when they were brought in, and instead of keeping them kind of as the act that they were, they could have just been Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch, instead, or Tammy Fitch, she might have been going by back then. They brought him in as Skip and Sunny, and, Sunny stuck because she was so hot and they did everything with her and she was able to stick around there. But Skip was dead in the water, man. You can't get over a Skip, especially when you bring in your long-lost cousin Zip and you form a tag team. Like, come on. So he was reborn in ECW and he was able to be a professional wrestler there. And I loved who Candido was in ECW. So just interesting to see him coming out here, working a Raw match after being there the previous year. Less than 1 year prior to this, he was in that very company. It's not like it was years before, like Vince couldn't remember. It was less than a year he was there as Skip. Actually, I remember him working SummerSlam 96 with like a neck brace. I think he was hurt. So, he was just there. And Vince doesn't know who he is. Hilarious. Anyway, that was fun stuff on that episode of Monday Night Raw from back in 1997. Another cool episode took place 20 years ago this week on June 11th, 2001, just a couple of months before 9/11. I was at this show in Richmond, Virginia, Monday Night Raw, with the main event being a cage match between Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. This was a phenomenal match to see live. You had Austin coming out there on commentary, which is very common for him in Richmond. Just a couple of years before this, I was at another famous Raw in Richmond right after Unforgiven 98 when Austin was feuding with Dude Love, and Dude Love or Mick Foley had the No Holds Barred match with Terry Funk in Richmond on Raw in the main event. That was a taping that I was at. That's when Vince was dancing on the stage with Foley, and Austin was on commentary for that match too, which is really interesting. And for this one in 2001, my seats were about, my friend Daniel was with me. I want to say we were like 10 to 15 rows behind the announce table. So we were on the floor kind of looking up, and when we saw some of those bumps, it was incredible to see live. Very cool stuff. And I can't remember what the segment was on that very same show, but earlier on in the show, Shane McMahon had a run in at some point, and I was on the aisle, and Shane, I've told the story before, just crouched. He just huddled right up next to me because he was waiting for his cue, and I didn't see him. And I'm sitting there watching the show, and I think I see something out of my peripherals or whatever, but I'm not paying attention. And then I just look down, and Shane McMahon is kneeling right next to me. Like I just put my arm just right on his shoulder. He's like right there. I'm like, oh, hello, Shane McMahon. And he's just kind of watching. I forgot what, it must have been something with, maybe it was Kurt Angle. I forgot who he was feuding with. Probably he was feuding with Kurt Angle because he worked with him at King of the Ring that year. So I don't remember what the fuck he was doing. I got to read those results again. I just want to talk about the main event mostly. But that was a cool experience to see Shane right there, and then he ran in and did his business or whatever. But the cage match was incredible because, this had two crazy cage dives. The first one was Kurt Angle doing the big moonsault off the top, which is still just crazy to see. Even now, even all these years later, 20 years ago, this happen, and it's still no less of a spectacular bump, especially how young Kurt Angle was in the business at that time. This guy's only like 2 years in. Motherfucker's moonsaulting off of cages. Crazy. And the way he came crashing down, Benoit moves, and Angle hit that ring, belly flopped, as Austin called it. Belly flopped right onto the mat. And the way he kind of bounced up, he just sold it perfectly. Looked like it killed him. It was so fucking good. And then right after that, after Angle misses the moonsault, Benoit's going up to, I guess, to the top of the cage to escape, and Austin hops off headset. The reason Austin is out there is because he's facing Benoit and Jericho both at the King of the Ring. He has to defend his title against both, and he would get injured in that, I believe, too. Or Benoit would, and Benoit would be, and Austin would too, because that was when Booker T debuted. But Benoit got injured in that match and would be off TV. So we are only about a week away from Benoit being gone for a year. But he's one half of the tag team champions here, because him and Benoit, or him and Jericho, beat Triple H and Austin in that famous match where Triple H tore his quad about a month before this. So, you know, Austin's out there to guess scout his competition. So that's what he's doing there. So he's trying to stop Benoit from scaling down the cage, and so Benoit climbs back up to the top, and he's like, well, fuck it. Angle's laying there on the mat, and he diving headbutt from the top of the cage, and this time it lands. You know, Angle missed his dive, but Benoit hit his. Amazing spot there twice, so we get the Kurt Angle moonsault and the Chris Benoit headbutt from the top. Incredible match that you would think is over by this point. Angle is dead. Benoit starts to crawl towards the door to escape. Austin is back at it again, takes the door, slams it on Chris Benoit's head, knocking him out. Kurt Angle recovers, climbs over the cage to win and get the victory. It was a very, very cool match to see live, and it's one that I'm very happy to be. I was just so lucky to be at some really cool Raws around this point. I got to see this match live. I got to see that Mick Foley and Terry Funk brawl live. They came right up to me. I mean, I was just feet away from them as they were brawling. It was so cool. I was on the floor behind the announce table as well for This Is Your Life on Monday Night Raw, highest rated Raw segment of all time. I was really lucky around this time to be at some really fun Monday Night Raws. And this one, Richmond was always hot. There was something about that building. NWA used to run there all the time as well. And Richmond, much like the Carolinas, was a really fun and hot crowd. If you go back and look at the show from June, you know, in 2001, the crowd is so hot in Richmond. I mean, they're just jacked for everything. And this is back when Austin was a heel. Austin was giving all sorts of shit to Jim Ross on commentary during this, because I think this was right after Austin beat the fuck out of him on SmackDown, like in Oklahoma City, when they were kind of failing at getting Austin over as a heel. But when he destroyed Jim Ross and just beat him to a bloody mess, that really helped, I think, you know, Austin's heel persona was for him to beat up Jim Ross, and he was being such a dick to him. I'll beat your ass again, son, if you say one thing to me or whatever. He was just all over Jim Ross during the entire match. So really fun. If you just are tired and sick and tired of today's Monday Night Raw, go back and take a look at this show. June 11th, 2001. Fun shit. And that cage match is incredible. And unfortunately, because it features Benoit, it's a cage match that's going to go and has gone largely forgotten. Number one, because of Benoit being in it, and number two, those are very dangerous bumps. I think Kurt Angle has even told the story that after the match, Vince said, thank you, but I don't ever want you to do that again, much like he told Foley after Hell in a Cell. He doesn't want to see them taking bumps like that, because that'll shorten your fucking career. And I think Angle would go on to do that again. Didn't he do it in TNA? Certainly Angle moonsaulted off a cage in TNA. How could he not? But it was cool to be in there in person and watch him do it for the first time. He'd be on the verge, too, of going babyface, because this was right around the time of the Invasion. Booker T would show up at King of the Ring. We'd get the Invasion pay-per-view the next month, and then Austin and Angle would work their title program at SummerSlam and the following month when Angle won the title at, I think, at Unforgiven or whatever it was. So this was an interesting time. A lot of people look back during the Invasion days as a failure, but the crowd was still hot. It was still exciting. There was still good wrestling to be had here, even though the storyline largely was a failure. There was still some good stuff here, and it would get pretty hot, I think, in July and August going into SummerSlam with some of the matches like Rock and Booker and Austin and Angle. Those are interesting dynamics, because now Austin is a chicken shit heel, and Kurt Angle is the fighting babyface that's going to whoop his ass. It's just such a different from where they were the previous year, say when Austin returned. We talked about that last week. That was the show we reviewed, September 25th, 2000. First show on TNN. Austin's first night back since getting run over. And he beat the shit out of Kurt Angle 2 nights in a row at the pay-per-view and the next night on Raw. So what a difference a year makes with that. But really interesting match there, fun match, and I have fond memories of going to shows back then. The other show I want to talk about took place 19 years ago. 19 years ago this week on June 10th, 2002. This was WWE Monday Night Raw from Atlanta, Georgia. This is the show that Austin decided he wasn't going to work. He was scheduled to face Brock Lesnar in a King of the Ring qualifying match, said that he's not going to show up at the show if he has to do the job. They said he had to do the job, so he didn't show up at the show. And this was an interesting one here because they called a lot of things on the fly. You could tell that they kind of rewrote Raw, very similar to how they do now every single fucking week. Back then, they got thrown a curveball. Steve Austin put a monkey wrench in all of their plans by no-showing here, and they were pissed, and you could tell they were pissed. So back then, this is when Vince and Flair had split ownership of the company. Vince was in charge of SmackDown. Flair was in charge of Raw. If any of my memory here is wrong, please correct me on this stuff. And Flair, I think the previous week he had lost a match where he had to become Steve Austin's assistant or some shit like that. So they were supposed to do all of this on Raw. Flair comes out there and announces to the crowd that Stone Cold Steve Austin did not show up. And, he didn't care enough about the fans and the WWE and all of that to grace you with his presence or whatever. He gets a few words out, and out comes Vince McMahon, who hasn't been on Raw in God knows how many months. He's been focusing most of his efforts on SmackDown. Comes out, grabs the mic, and lays down a challenge to Ric Flair for a match in the main event for 100% ownership of WWE. You could tell this was just on the fly. This was hot-shotted. They were going to have, Vince, I think, was so irritated and angry about what happened with Austin. He's like, I got to take back over in a kayfabe role. Like, I need to be, the full-on owner or whatever. And I think he just wanted to take his company back that night. So he goes, Flair, we're going to fight. You're going to lose. I'm taking back my company. I'm pissed at Steve Austin or whatever. So he comes out there, challenges Ric Flair. I think he accepts or whatever, and we get that match in the main event. Now, Ric Flair gets all bloody. It's kind of a street fight. Maybe not as good as the one they had at the Royal Rumble, but still pretty fun. And it's also a no-holds-barred match, which means anybody can come down there and interfere, which someone does. Brock Lesnar, the guy that's supposed to face Steve Austin. Brock would actually defeat Bubba Dudley on the show in a qualifying match instead. So I think it was Bubba that took Austin's place here. And Lesnar and Heyman hit the ring. Lesnar attacks Ric Flair, hits him with the F5. Vince pins him and regains 100% control of the WWE. You could tell Vince, he was salty as hell. He was very angry at Steve Austin, and I think he just wanted to be, back in control as the lead, authority figure on Raw or whatever, because he's kind of like in damage control mode here. So this was all really interesting. You could see in Vince's demeanor, he was so red-faced at the beginning of the show. He was just probably super pissed off, and they would do the very next week, I think they would do the spot on Confidential, the USA show that they had briefly that aired on like Saturdays. And they did a whole piece on Austin walking out. Ross was interviewed, McMahon was interviewed, and they were all like, this motherfucker took his ball and went home and all that stuff. So they were, I think that was the very next Saturday. So like 5 days later, they ran that piece on the weekend. And then the following week, June 17th, 2002, was one of my favorite final Raw segments of all time because I watched it live, and I was so surprised and I was so happy, and I did not see it coming. I didn't know what they were going to do. The following week, for those of you who don't know, Vince McMahon comes out and he wants to elaborate a little bit more about the Steve Austin situation, and he calls Steve Austin out to the ring, and he wants him to appear there, and I think he gives him until like the end of the night. Meet me, Austin, in the middle of the ring, and we'll bury the hatchet, or we'll toast a beer, or whatever. We want you back. But at the time, you're reading the dirt sheets, and there's no indication that Austin is back. Apparently, this ended badly. There's no way they could have patched things up in a week. So, Vince is saying that he's going to call out Austin in the main event all night long on this Monday Night Raw. And I think it's backstage. He's got his cronies there, and I think Tony Gurria comes up to him and says he's here. And so Vince is like, great, I'm going to the ring. Oh, shit. I'm going to the ring right now. Tell Austin to meet me there. Vince comes out to the ring, and he gets on the mic, and he says, come on down here, Austin. We don't have all night. Come on down here. Let's do this. And that's when Tony Gurria walks to the ring, and Vince is like, what are you doing here? He signals for Vince to come over. Tony Gurria gets in the ring, and he kind of whispers in Vince's ear and tells him, and he goes, and Vince is like, wait a minute, you've been talking about all night wasn't Stone Cold Steve Austin? well, who the hell is the he you were talking about? And then you hear, if you smell, the fucking crowd explodes. It was so awesome. Such a nice surprise. I marked the fuck out. I'm like, The Rock. You know, The Rock isn't even on Raw. I think he's on SmackDown. He was going to be coming back. Everybody knew that, but not until the next month. So him coming out here was a complete surprise. And it was I thought it was always, like, I always thought it was a really nice thing that The Rock did. Because he's now a movie star Rock, and everything, you know, his schedule's very tight or whatever, and he wasn't supposed to come back. But after what Austin did, there's a huge void to fill now. And Rock was happy to come back a month early and do that. And got in the ring, sent Vince on his way, threw the beer can at him, and cut a promo, threw a little bit of shade at Austin about how he took his ball and went home, and called out the entire WWE locker room. He goes, I swear to God, I mean this. If there's one person back there that doesn't want to be here, then just like the slogan says, you get the F out. And it's the only time Rock has really ever broke the third person, you know, because he goes, as far as, you know, when he goes, Austin can take his ball and go home, but as far as The Rock is concerned, and then he kind of pauses and he goes, as far as I'm concerned, and he's like, this is home. And then he does the if you smell. And it was one of the best promos that I can ever remember, especially like in more, you know, recent times, post-attitude era times. It was great. And, you know, The Rock did him a solid. Rock came back. They would put the title on him, and he would be the one to put Brock over at SummerSlam. And Brock just beat him when Brock got booed out of the building in Nassau Coliseum for whatever reason. I thought The Rock deserved more respect for that because from that audience, because, you know, he came back early here when he didn't have to. You know, wrestling was already becoming to be a rear view mirror thing for The Rock. I mean, he was just starting to bubble in Hollywood, and it was only the beginning for him. And for him to come back a little bit early and use his star power to put over Brock because Austin didn't want to do it. I always thought it was interesting that crowd, a New York crowd that's supposed to be smart, shit on him the way they did. You know, they should have just shown him a little bit more love than that. And he put Brock over, and of course Brock would win the title. And then about a year later, Austin would make amends with Vince. No heat with him and The Rock over the words that Rock said in his promo. I think Austin admitted his fault in this, and anybody that called him out for going home or being unprofessional, Austin didn't hold a grudge because they were right, and Austin knew it, and he owned up to it and apologized to everybody to the point where him and Rock remained immensely close, and he would have his last match with The Rock less than a year after this very promo with The Rock kind of throwing shade. They would patch up their beef, have their final match, and remain friends to this day. So in the end, it's all a happy ending, but man, back then, this were 18 years ago now, on that famous night where Austin walked out, NWO was back in. Austin wasn't as over as he once was. As Vince McMahon said, he goes, he's reduced to making gold albums as opposed to platinum ones, which is still very good, still very high spot on the card. But he wasn't happy with what he did at WrestleMania 18, and he wasn't happy with anything he did after that. And then when he's already frustrated, his personal life is kind of a mess. He's not in a good place in his life, and then they tell him that he's going to lose in a match that's unadvertised and barely promoted at all anyway. And he maintains to this day that it wasn't about doing the job. It was about doing it the way they did it. And if you're going to beat me, you know, it needs to mean something, and I'll always do business that way. But, you know, I don't want to do this. And, he left. So that all took place. All that stuff went down this week in history on Monday Night Raw. So this is going to be a fun segment to do going forward because there's a lot of good shit coming up. We got the pipe bomb coming up that took place in late June. All sorts of good shit. I got a bunch of stuff written down that we'll talk about here in upcoming streams. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll see what you guys say about this if you have any memories of this at all. Your dad's 34th birthday. Jesus, Jose, how old are you, dude? Yeah, he was also unhappy. You're right, Timu. You're right. He was unhappy with the general direction of WWE because I think Austin truly did not like Hogan and those guys coming in. Austin had like heat with Hogan, sort of, in a lot of ways. Austin always talked shit about him, and then Austin became so over to the point I'm like, man, he's even more over than Hogan. The ovations that he gets, the merchandise he sells. And I can, there's a big part of me that can understand Austin's complaint because, he saved WWE single-handedly from WCW in the Attitude Era, became bigger star than Hogan ever was in terms of, the current times. And you would think that when Hogan came back in, for Austin to take a back seat to him, that is probably hard to swallow. That's actually the match many people thought you should have had was Austin versus Hogan. I'm glad we got The Rock versus Hogan because that match was fucking epic. And I couldn't imagine the fans turning on Austin the way they turned on The Rock. in that match. They might have, but to the degree they did, at least Rock had a little bit of that heat with the smart audience. Austin was pretty much beloved across the board, even after his failed heel run, and he was back as a babyface here. He was still super over. So if he would have faced Hogan, that would have been interesting to see what that Toronto crowd would have done. I think any other crowd would have been immensely behind Austin. But seeing Hogan back in the WWE after all that time, even for a guy like me who didn't like Hogan, I got to admit it was cool. You know, I always shit on Hogan when he was in WCW. Oh, this dinosaur, this old wrinkled up, Uncle Creepy with a good build, as Jim Cornette called him, this bald bastard. I just thought he was just the most washed up, dried up, rotted out prune in the world in WCW. But the minute you get that Hogan back in WWE, you're immediately transported right back to your childhood. And I think a lot of those fans in Toronto felt the same way, and they got the best of him. And it would have been interesting to see how that would have worked with Austin. So I think he was just maybe slightly insulted, because we all dreamed of the day of Hogan coming into WWE and getting owned by Austin, and it really wasn't like that. They had a couple of run-ins in the ring. I know NWO, the night that they debuted, interfered in Austin's match, and I think he exchanged a couple of fists with Hogan. After Hogan would turn babyface, I think they had a tag match right before Hogan left, or they did a little beer toast or something. But, for the most part, I think Austin was resentful of Hogan. And then they put the fucking belt on Hogan on top of that, which was even crazier, that I really didn't like or whatever. So I think Austin just didn't like the direction. And now that WCW was out of business and WWE had enough money to pay a lot of these big stars to come back in, he didn't like that he might be, pushed aside a little bit. And when you combine that with everything else going on in his life personally, it boiled over, and he made a big mistake. But he also owned up to it and, did his best to bounce back regardless. But it was Toronto was a huge Hogan city, always was. Toronto was a regular stop in those old days too, Maple Leaf Garden Wrestling and all that. Hogan had a lot of big matches in Toronto back when he had his first run as champion. When they would go through there, they would always save the big opponents for him. I know he faced, Killer Khan, Bundy, all sorts of guys in Toronto. Good stuff, as well as the Spectrum and Boston Garden and all across the Northeast like that. Hogan was the shit. Darth Destructor, been watching wrestling since 1984. That's about when all the craziness started. Prior to 84, you were still in Backlund and Bruno land, but once Hogan came out in January, beat the Sheik, it hasn't been the same since. Yeah, I got to go back and watch that one, but I remember when Hogan returned to the red and yellow, but I don't specifically remember the pop in WCW, but I remember when he went back to that, which seemed like a natural progression, something that was going to have to happen with him. But then he was back and forth between red and yellow and black and white so many times, I done lost track. Yeah, Brian, and after all that shit that they went through, Brock gets pushed and then decides to leave for like 8 fucking years. Eight. Oh wow, you're 27. You're almost 8 when Vince and Rock and Stone Cold took place. Yeah, it was interesting stuff. I watched a little bit of it today just to refresh my memory on Austin walking out and what was going on with him in storyline at the time, and he was feuding with Flair a little bit. And I think Flair had kind of even gone heel at this point, like a heel commissioner now. I think he had enlisted the help of the Big Show and all of that. Oh, and another thing that happened on the show, by the way, in the June 10th, 2002 show, was the infamous NWO promo with Shawn Michaels. Shawn had just come back in and joined the NWO for some fucking reason, along with X-Pac, Kevin Nash, Big Show, and Booker T. He brought everybody out to the ring. Shawn wasn't back in the ring yet. He was just a member of the NWO. Brought everybody out to the ring, tried to figure out what the problems were with the NWO, talked about Kevin Nash being his best friend, Big Show being a monster, and X-Pac starts to insult him a little bit and then turns around and says, "You're the best in-ring worker in the entire business," and then turns around and nails Booker T with a gnarly super kick that Booker T ate with his whole face. He goes down like a ton of bricks, and Shawn goes, "You're the problem," and they kick out Booker T out of the NWO, and I think it would be the week after that, or maybe the next week, that Nash would tear his quad, and then he'd be out of the NWO, and then the whole thing would just end, and then Triple H and Shawn would briefly reform DX, only for Triple H to turn on him, turn heel, and set up the SummerSlam match. But It was good to see Sean back here. This was after he had kind of cleaned himself up. It was the night of the buyout that they finally fired him for being just fucked up and inebriated on the job. And here he is kind of back. He's found Jesus. He's sober. He's happy. He's got purpose. And he's here to make amends. And he really did. He never turned back. And that match he had with Triple H at SummerSlam was incredible. But as we come into future This Week in History segments, I'm sure we'll be talking about soon when Triple H turns on Sean and throws him through the glass window in the car and all that stuff, and they make the SummerSlam match. So that's all coming up on the horizon. But yeah, good times back in the day, y'all. Real good times. I'll probably wrap it up here in just a second since we've got a good time on the stream. Eva is a legend. Hey, we talked about that earlier. I talked about Eva Marie. I thought the booking was brilliant. I think that's what they should do with her. Continue to troll us as long as they can, and just make sure you have some sort of decent payoff in mind. Don't do all this shit with no end game. If you have no idea how you're going to wrap it up or how you're going to make it, entertaining, for the fans, have that in your head. Michael, appreciate the didn't Big Show eat a kick too? I don't think so. I think it was just Booker T in that segment. Pretty sure. Maybe in a future one or something. But yeah, NWO would just fizzle and disintegrate right after that anyway. Michael, appreciate the $5, dude. Correct me if I'm wrong. I live in Long Beach, New York. Stu and Helen got married here, and Smith Hart was born here as well. I think so. I know Helen is from New York. Stu is not. I think it was Paul Bosch, I think, introduced Helen and Stu, if my memory serves, and I think all that went down there. I wasn't sure Smith was born in New York. I didn't know that. I wasn't sure how many Hart kids were born in the U.S. and how many weren't. Smith might have been the only one. The rest of them might have been pumped out in Canada. I think you're right, but I'm not totally sure. Zane G, appreciate 20 more from you, dude. You're on a roll tonight. Thank you so much, man. Would you WWE had let Rock know that Austin was out in order WWE to squeeze him into that night's Raw, although Rock wasn't even scheduled for the Raw? I think when that happened with Austin the previous week, they reached out to The Rock. How do you feel about coming back? And it was the week after that he came out there. So I think that was all done in a response to Austin. I don't think Rock would have came back and made that early appearance, certainly not on Raw. It was all due to Austin, just like Vince coming back and saying, okay, well, no more of this Flair's in charge of Raw, I'm in charge of SmackDown shit. I got to be back in charge, fully. And that's why they ran those angles, was all in response. I don't think those were the original plans at all. So with Rock coming there, I thought it was just a great way to bring him out at the end because it caught me off guard. I didn't see it. I don't know how I didn't see it coming, but it was just such a cool moment when Vince is like, who the hell is the he you were talking about? Just great shit. All in all, great shit. And it was a good, morale building thing, because that was something that was ugly that happened. Here Hogan and Nash and Hall and all these guys and Shawn are all, we're always accused of, pulling political BS and blah, blah, blah. And it's Austin that's the one that makes the stink. When all those guys are there, it was a weird time. I remember being so depressed and thinking to myself, who would have thought I'd be living in a world where Hogan is in the WWE and Austin is not? To me, that blew my mind, because it was only 2002. Try to think of that exact same scenario in your head only 2 years prior to this in 2000. You'd say it was the craziest idea you've ever heard. A mere 2 years later, it's a reality. Crazy times, man. We don't have any crazy times like that now. We wish we did. My God. Yeah, maybe you might be right about that, Brian. I was only kind of skimming through some of the results and going back and watching some of these segments. So maybe it was a later episode or maybe it was later on that night, but I thought it was just a matter of kicking Booker T out. And then I know there was a tag match in a following week where Nash went down with the quad deal and wouldn't be back until 2003 when Shawn and Triple H were feuding. And he had to come back and be put right in the middle of it, as he said. And that led to a Triple H and Nash match at Judgment Day, which I was also at live in Charlotte in 2003. I remember. The Goldust Crocodile. Oh, was that the same show? Goldust. I kind of remember that. The Crocodile Hunter. Oh my God. I used to have a roommate that did. My roommate Ben. He did Crocodile Hunter, and we would always have parties at one of my friend's house who had a long hardwood floor. And for some reason, he would always go once he started drinking, he'd go into Steve Irwin mode, and he'd go, crikey, and then just do this running slide, and he would slide on his chest all the way down the wooden floor to the end. And they would always say, hey, Ben, do crikey. And he'd go, crikey, and he'd just do the whole thing. So every time I think of Steve Irwin or Crocodile Hunter, I think of Ben. But Goldust did a good job. So I guess right after this, maybe this is when Booker T and Goldust would hook up, right? Maybe after the NWO thing. They made a great team, an entertaining team. They're kind of the version. They're kind of like what we get with Riddle and Randy Orton now. It's always good to have that crazy odd couple. We've always had that. Have you noticed? Head Cheese, Al Snow and Steve Blackman, Goldust and Booker T, Riddle and Orton. Give me other examples. There's plenty. There's plenty of these. There's probably even some with the women that I can't think of. Kind of like, you could even maybe kind of include Austin and Mankind when Mankind wanted Austin to pick him to be his tag team partner. Pick me, Steve. Pick me, Steve. Fun stuff. Yeah, Rock, John Cena, and Stone Cold. No shit. Yeah, I've heard a couple of rumblings about that, about a potential Roman Reigns babyface turn. That's odd. I wouldn't even think about doing that until fans come back, because if fans just start cheering the motherfucker, you might just have to. But I wouldn't do anything differently with Roman right now than what I'm doing, although I don't want them to turn him babyface at all. But I also don't want the fans to think that if they do turn him babyface, that means he's going to go back to the old Roman. That would be even too ridiculous for WWE. And they're about as ridiculous as you get. They make about as dumbest decisions as one can even fathom making. But even they can't be that dumb. He's not going to come back out there with a vest and start talking about suffer and succotash. There's no way. But again, what makes his character so good, is his soft-spoken godfather-like attitude, this tribal chief acknowledge me shit. I want to see that continue until he gets in the ring with somebody that's going to be really interesting when he tells them to acknowledge him, like The Rock or Brock. So I ain't turning Roman face until he faces one of them. But WWE, you never know. They probably just can't resist doing some shit, and Vince is such a damn idiot. There's no telling what they've got in store for Roman. But I'm not too concerned with him turning babyface yet. You got to remember, on Friday, he murdered a kid. He killed Dominic, threw him right over the ring onto the splat. They're still scraping him up. And now he's got a Hell in a Cell match with Dominic's dad, and he's probably going to annihilate poor Ray. Probably take a shot at his wife while he's out there. He's not really anywhere close to being a babyface, at least right now. So if there's any babyface talk, it's got to be a ways in the future, because Roman Reigns just did the most heelish thing you can do. Kill a kid. So I don't think we're in any danger of Roman being a babyface, at least in the immediate future. But maybe by the end of the summer or something like that, who knows? I suppose it's possible. We'll have to see. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here now. I need some dinner. You guys have a good rest of your Monday night. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, I'll be back up. Video schedule is going to be fun all summer long. Very different. Nothing's going to be too consistent here, because we're going to do videos whenever we can find time to do them. So I think I'm going to be up here on Sunday. Shut up, Greg. I'm going to be up here on Wednesday for a news brief. We'll be doing that. We'll talk about any sort of wrestling news that's going on. I also want to talk about whatever goes on tomorrow on NXT with William Regal, and if he does, in fact, introduce a new authority role. And then on Saturday, I'll be up here to do Hell in the Cell predictions. And then on Sunday, we'll be reviewing Hell in the Cell right after the pay-per-view. So that is the deal. Make sure you subscribe on your way out the door. Give this video a like. Follow me on Twitter. Click that notifications bell with all you got. And make sure you're here on Wednesday for our next stream. Thank you again for being here. Take care. Have a good night. Peace.